Hello and welcome to the Cold War in Latin America. On Monday, we're going to jump into this subject. So, right now, you need to know the basis of the Cold War, what it was, and how it affected the world. As always, you should be taking detailed Cornell notes, and all of the words that are underlined, of course, are your vocabulary. Let's jump right in. First and foremost, what is a Cold War? Well, there are three stages to war. As you can see on your screen, a hot war is all-out war. Bullets are flying and you're fighting. Warm war, you're preparing for war. You are making sure your soldiers have the right equipment, and you're also making sure that your battleships are in the right place and your drones are all nice and polished. You are preparing to fight, but there's no actual fighting just yet. A Cold War is something completely different. A Cold War is when two nations openly hate each other, but they're not preparing to fight and they're never going to fight. This is what happens with the United States and the USSR after World War II. This Cold War, this conflict, will last for over 40 years, and the effects of it will be felt around the globe. After World War II, the United States and the USSR, Russia, emerge as the two superpowers of the world. The United States starts to help Europe rebuild, and they're also trying to help Japan to rebuild as well. We want them to be our capitalist ally in Asia. Russia is rebuilding itself and helping to rebuild Eastern Europe. These two countries are large, they're wealthy, and they're powerful. And they are going to engage in a fight for power, control, and for political ideologies. The United States is a capitalist country, and Russia is a communist country. And they both want to spread their own political ideologies around the world. So, what is capitalism? As you know, the United States is a capitalist society. Basically, capitalism is economic freedom. If you have a good idea and you implement it into a business, you are free to make as much money as possible with no interference from the government. To make the best vanilla latte around? Awesome. You can take your idea, you can take your product, and you can market it and you can sell it. And if the market, if consumers, us, love your vanilla latte, then you're free to make money from that. The thing is, if you maybe have a barista at your local Starbucks who always gets your order wrong and never remembers your name, you as a consumer are free to go elsewhere. You can go to Pete's, you can go to Phil's, you can go to What a Grind, you can drive through McDonald's and grab a cup of coffee on your way to work. That's the thing about capitalism. You have a lot of choice and a lot of competition. This is an interesting economic system, and in a lot of ways, it's really good. And there's some bad things with capitalism as well. Think the Industrial Revolution, when capitalism is exploding in America with this huge boom in industry. There's a lot of shady things going on. Really bad working conditions, no such thing as a 40-hour work week, no weekends, no bathroom breaks, and a ton of child labor. Because when you're trying to turn as big of a profit as possible, you're probably not going to spend a lot of your money paying your workers or making sure that your workers have safe working conditions, right? You can justify paying an 8-year-old girl 5 cents a day in a garment factory. Later, with the onset of unions, capitalism starts to even out and people are paid better and their working conditions improve. And we start to see that this builds a really booming economy for lots of people, not just people at the top. It creates a really strong middle class. So when we go back to Western Europe to help them rebuild after World War II, we want them to be as capitalist as possible. We want to open up markets for ourselves. We want to be able to buy and sell and trade with them. And also, we truly believe that capitalism is freedom. And if they can become capitalist, if they can have a good, booming economy, there's less of a chance that they will fall to communism. There's less of a chance that they will look toward the government to help them. So, socialism is sometimes referred to as diet communism or communism light. It's a political system where large industries are owned by the government. Think hospitals, jails, airlines. These huge industries are owned by the government, and the government takes taxes away from these big industries and the extremely wealthy, and it redistributes them to some of its poor citizens so that everyone is a bit more equal. And that's interesting. And back in the day, when we're talking about Cold War, socialism is linked very closely with communism. Today, you're really going to see socialism as a political party in Europe. And what it basically means is you're probably going to have free healthcare and you're going to be able to get out of college without crushing debt, because both of those two industries, healthcare and colleges, they're not run for a profit. So no one's trying to make money off of you. So, communism, at its most basic level, is an economic system designed to equally benefit everyone in society. The idea is everyone contributes and they all get an equal share of property and goods. The government controls all means of production, all food, all goods, and there is no privately owned property. The idea is if you do your fair share, you get a fair amount of the food and the goods, and you have a place to live. At its core, it sounds pretty utopian, but it doesn't always shake out this way. This is kind of the idea that we're led to believe that communism is. Everyone happy and healthy in a pretty field, doing their share of the work and getting their share of the goods. Under Joseph Stalin, communism is a complete nightmare. It's a society where you're supposed to have rights for workers and everyone gets a little bit of everything, but there are no rights for workers. The government controls everything and they are kind of scared to give it away. They're paranoid. They think that people aren't doing enough. So, because of this fear and paranoia, they end up hoarding grain of all things, and it creates a man made famine. Millions of people will die from this famine, and there are going to be death squads that basically roam the country. And if they think you're not doing enough or harvesting enough, or that you're hoarding something, grain or wheat for yourself, they're going to kill you. If they think that you are not a good communist, if they think that you could possibly want a different form of government, they're going to kill you. Joseph Stalin kind of gets lost in history in World War II because we always talk about Hitler as this evil monster, and my God, he is. He is the worst of the worst. But Stalin is a nightmare. Tens of millions of people, of Russians, will die under his leadership from famines, from death squads, from gulags. It's just he's this guy. He is the guy whose son gets captured in World War II, and he could easily trade some prisoners for him. No, he lets him die in a death camp. He is the worst. Don't let that handsome mustache fool you. This guy is pure evil. And the United States is really weary of him. Even when we're fighting on the same side, we don't trust him. We don't trust Stalin because this is what communism looks like under his rule. That widespread famine is affecting everyone, and the United States is not about to let this come to our shores, and we don't want it anywhere else in the world. Russia is big enough. We're terrified that this could really affect our way of life. So, what exactly is our way of life? You hear this often, but really it's about freedom. Freedom of choice, of competition, freedom to make as much money as you want. This is kind of the code for our way of life. And we truly believe that Russia is big enough to really do some damage to that and possibly even destroy it. This is Senator Joseph McCarthy. And if you've heard the word McCarthyism, it comes from this guy. After World War II, the United States and Russia start building up an arsenal of nuclear weapons. And some of the technology from the United States is being leaked into Russia. There are actual Soviet spies in the United States taking our technology, and it creates mass hysteria. It is a terrifying time in the United States. And this guy, Joseph McCarthy, starts calling people out for being communist. He starts accusing people. And if you've ever read The Crucible, then you have some kind of background on this, on what it means to be accused, who believes you, who doesn't believe you, how you can even possibly clear your name. So this is a time in American history where you're not even sure if you can trust your neighbor. And just the word communism or communist is enough to create real panic and fear. People are absolutely terrified that the United States and Russia are going to use these very powerful weapons against each other. And because of this kind of panic, the United States turns into a very ugly place, and our government starts to do some very shady and pretty ruthless things to other countries who start adopting communism as a government. The USSR has pretty much the same fears that the United States has. We are afraid, excuse me, they are afraid, the USSR is afraid that the United States will have influence in Western Europe, and it will stop the USSR from turning Europe completely communist, since they already have a stronghold in Eastern Europe. In fact, Churchill will describe that stronghold as an Iron Curtain, which we'll get into later in class. But the Soviets are afraid that we're trying to destroy their system. You know what? They're right to be afraid. We're right to be afraid. We are both trying to destroy each other and to take the political ideologies from our political parties and destroy them. So why don't the United States and Russia go to war against each other? Because of a little thing called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction, which basically means if you fire your nuclear weapons at us, we'll fire our nuclear weapons at you, and we will quite literally blow up the entire world. These two countries are too big, too powerful, they have too many nuclear bombs to actually fight each other. Hence the Cold War. We are staring each other down. We're not preparing to fight. We know we're never going to fight. It will mean the end of the world. But we're still terrified that Russia is going to keep spreading its political ideologies. We call this the domino theory. We are convinced that if one country falls to communism, all of the countries around it will fall as well. You're going to see this especially in Southeast Asia. Once China becomes communist and half of Korea becomes communist, we are absolutely convinced that if Vietnam falls, Japan, first of all, the countries around Vietnam will fall, and then Japan will fall. We can't have that happen. Japan is our only ally in this section of the world, and we're not letting them go. In order to stop these dominoes from falling, we develop a system called containment. Basically, we are going to stop communism by standing up to the Soviets wherever they want to expand. We are going to chase the Soviets around the globe in order to make sure that communism doesn't get bigger and doesn't get closer to us. How serious are we about this? When North Korean communists marched into South Korea holding weapons that they had acquired from Russia, the United States went to war. From 1950 to 1953, we sent our boys to Korea to make sure that the spread of communism wouldn't get any further than the 38th parallel. We're going to engage in an incredibly controversial war in Vietnam from 1959 to 1975. We're going to send a lot of young men to die in order to make sure that Vietnam doesn't fall to communism. And in the process, the Soviets are completely funding the North and the Viet Cong. They know what we're doing. We know what they're doing. This is Cold War politics. Cold War policies are going to rage in Iran when we overthrow their democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. You're going to see some really dirty things done by the United States in order to keep oil prices low. When Mossadegh wants to nationalize, we scream communism. We're really, really good at pointing fingers and doing things in the name of our way of life. We're eventually going to fund an entire war in Afghanistan by supplying weapons and money to the Mujahideen from 1979 to 1989. They're directly fighting the Russians. We eat this up. We can't believe our luck that we can give weapons to these people and they will directly fight the Russians for us. And they do. They fight. They are incredible fighters. They know their land and their terrain better than anyone in the whole entire world. It's a rugged, rough terrain in Afghanistan. And they're going to beat the Russians. And in the process, they're going to really deplete this huge empire of all of its money. But another fun fact about Cold War politics, when the war is over, it's over. And the United States leaves. These guys, the Mujahideen, they're going to become the modern day Taliban and take all those weapons we sent to them and turn them on us. So that's how serious we are about fighting for the Cold War, fighting for this ideology that communism can't get anywhere near us. So imagine how we feel if we are terrified of communism in Iran and Afghanistan and Southeast Asia. Imagine how scared we are when it pops up in Guatemala or Nicaragua or Cuba or El Salvador or Chile or Haiti. This is in our hemisphere. It's in our backyard. In Cuba, it's 90 miles away from us. Imagine the panic and hysteria that is going to come to our shores. This is what we're going to get into in class. How some of these governments are communist. Some of them have no ties at all to communism, but they do have ties to American business. And when they want a better deal with American business and we don't want to play ball with them, we just throw the word communist around. And it allows us to do really dirty things, many of which the American people aren't even aware of that are actually happening. Because of our Cold War policies, you're going to see familiar patterns emerge all throughout Latin America. Latin America is an area of the world that has had a hierarchy which has been set in stone since the days of European imperialism. There are very, very few at the top, and they own everything and they hold all of the wealth. And some of those very, very few are American businesses. These are agrarian countries. So in the mid 20th century, Latin America is going to see a new kind of leader. Leaders who come out and say, it's time to nationalize our natural resources. It is time to redistribute land, take from the rich and give to the poor. If you work the land, you should own some of the land. And this is going to send up some big communist red flags to the United States. Nationalize and redistribute are incredibly communist ideas. They're very communist things to say. However, they also take money directly out of the pockets of American businesses. So you're going to see the United States either accuse people of being communists who are not, or go into countries where there are communist leaders and stage CIA-funded coups d'etats. We're going to basically take elected government officials out of power and put in puppet governments who are run by military juntas and dictators, really evil, awful guys. But they are anti-communist and they are pro-American business. And if these people don't want to play with us, we're going to embargo them and we're going to starve them out. It's a dirty time. Get ready for Monday. This is going to be an awesome unit. Thanks for listening.